inte konstigt att det är fruktansvärt mycket folk runt den här bilen. Det är en Ferrari, den har en V12, den ser ut som ett rymdskepp eller tagen ur en Barbarella-film från sent 60 eller tidigt 70-tal. Den är helt fantastisk, men det är inte bara en showbil. Numera är den också körbar. Och den går helt fantastiskt bra.
This is Ferrari 512 S Modulo. It was a Ferrari 512S race car, and then Ferrari turned it into a 612 Can-Am race car. And then when they were done with its racing, they took the pistons and connecting rods and transmission gears out because they were a frugal company, and they sent it to Pininfarina to make a prototype concept car for the show car circuit. And in 1964, a designer named Sid Mead did a series of what would the future look like for U.S. Steel. And he did a mural that was at the World's Fair in 1964. And the idea was, in the future, cars would both drive and fly. So he did a very futuristic drawing that really looked like what Modulo became. And a number of years later, a designer at Pininfarina, who I'm sure was aware of Sid Mead's work, came up with Modulo. At first, Sergio Pininfarina really didn't like the car. He thought it was too futuristic, not worth showing, and they kept it in the basement. A number of years later, Bertoni made the Stratos Zero, which was a fantastic car. And when Bertoni showed the Stratos Zero, all of a sudden it got a lot of acclaim, so Pininfarina started showing Modulo. And Modulo traveled all over the world. It won a lot of design awards, and people really thought it was a masterpiece. I began with Pininfarina with Ferrari P45 by Pininfarina. I sent them my Daytona-winning P34 chassis 0846 and a brand new Enzo, and I said, let's put the ideas together and make a car. So that became Ferrari P45, and I had a P45 by Pininfarina, and I had a very good relationship with Andrea Pininfarina. And of course, the car that I loved that they did was Dino Competizione, the yellow Dino, which became really the prototype for the Ferrari Dino. It was basically a half of a P4. It was a 2-liter versus a P4's 4-liter, but they looked very similar. And then as time went by and I began building my own cars, the SCGs, which we race and we build road legal examples of, you know, I went to Pininfarina and I said, look, Modulo, I would love to have Modulo, and you know, it's sitting in your museum, and frankly it's rotting away. And the car had never run as Modulo. It ran as a 512S and it ran as a 612 Can-Am.
Nice luggage compartment.
Yeah, there's one in the front too. So time went by, and there was a period where Pininfarina had some financial issues, and I think they were afraid that what happened to Bertoni would happen to them, which is if they went into bankruptcy, the Italian government might seize the collection as collateral, and it would be locked in a museum forever. So they called me and said, look, Jim, if you'll buy this car today and get it out of here, we'll sell it to you. And I did that. And I told them that I wanted to make it run. Now, because of all of my Ferrari classic cars, I have both the P34 and I have a very famous 412P. I had a lot of factory spares. So I was able to source the internals for the gearbox and the internals for the pistons and the connecting rods, and we were able to make Modulo a fully functioning car. And 2 days ago, I took it up into the mountains above Modena in Maranello, and Top Gear photographed it and documented it, and we drove it 100 kilometers. The car drives great. There are a couple of myths about the car. One of the myths is, oh, the car can't steer. The car can steer. It has the steering ratio of a 512S, so it's not, tremendously tight. But we modified that in several ways. One is I put in a P4 steering rack, which helps a lot. And the other thing is when Pininfarina had initially made the car, they flipped the A-arms, so the geometry was completely wrong. But my mechanics knew right away what to do. We straightened it out, and the car was fine. I missed the turn to Villa Erba this morning, so I had to go like this, but the car drove fine. And I'm just so happy that people get to see it, and it's a fully functioning car. Because the thing about cars are, they are art, but they are kinetic art. They're moving. And if they don't move, they're not a car. It's much like a Calder mobile. It's not a static thing. And look, this is a very famous car. 100 years from now, it'll still be looked at for its design cues. And what's amazing to me is that 50 years later, it still looks futuristic. And that's really because of people like Cy Mead and Pininfarina.
There's so much I want to ask you, but I have to start with the A-arms. Did you actually redo them or flip them around? Because the steering ratio thing, or the front end that's complex.
Yes, no. What happened was when I got the car back to our shop, my mechanic Sal Barone, who has been with me for 40 years and restored all of my cars, said, "Jim, what do you want to do?" And I said, "I want to drive the car." And he said, "Okay." And I said, "But Sal, there's a big problem with the steering. I don't think it works too well." And I didn't know what to do. I thought maybe we would design it so that the front spats turned with a wheel or something. And he said, "No, go home, it'll be fine." And then at 2 in the morning, he called me and I said, "Yeah, Sal, what is it?" And he said, "Those idiots at Pininfarina, they didn't understand the geometry. I fixed it. Car steers fine."
You being who you are, do you have a next project coming up?
Well, quite honestly, we're really focusing on SCG. We're doing a lot of models. We're doing one model that's going to race the Baja this year and be a road legal version of the original Baja boot that Steve McQueen won the Baja 500 in, and that Hunter Thomas wrote about in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. That's a really cool car. We have our SCG 003C, which is going to race in 2 weeks at the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. In its last race, it did very well. It won first in class, 6th overall. We beat Ferrari, we beat Aston Martin, we beat Lamborghini. Of course, the Porsches and the BMWs and the Mercedes were ahead of us. We finished 6th, but we're very optimistic for the 24 Hours of Nürburgring. We're developing a new car for next year, a sports car. It's a very basic sports car. The one thing about SCG is we're not making electric cars, we're not making autonomous cars. We're making cars that people on Sunday morning are going to get in and have an outing like they would if they had a sailboat or something. And we're going to make that as a race and a road car. It's an interesting car. It's a center seater with 2 rear seats for the passengers. So the visibility is really good, very interesting. And we'll be making a race and a road version of that. And we've pre-sold over 50 cars.